So today, I'm going to invite you into my home and into my kitchen. I'm going to share a bit about my family and our quest for our COVID-19 bread recipe. So to start with, my husband's background is in engineering. His forte, routine, and structure. He figures out the very best way to make something happen, and that's it. It works from then on out. So meals are especially a place where he figures out what works and he simplifies. Cereal for breakfast, a sandwich for lunch, and then a 2-week rotating supper menu that changes winter to summer. My forte is creativity and cooking. Meals provide 21 opportunities every week to be creative. So in a year, that is 1,095 meals to imagine and to create. So when my husband declared sandwiches every day for lunch during lockdown, it was actually a protective gift given to save me from myself and dishes. Except now I needed to provide bread for 5 people, 2 of which are boys, for 7 meals a week. Only shopping every 2 weeks. And that kind of looks like hoarding. Why do you have so many loaves of bread in your cart? Or limit 1. So I did what any reasonable person with loads of time and who needed bread would do. I opted to make my own bread. But not just any bread, our favorite bread. Panera's tomato basil bread. And being the professional researcher that I am, I went to the most reliable of all sources, Pinterest, and I searched tomato basil bread recipe copycat. I found 5 recipes, and after reading all of them, noting similarities and differences, I used the recipe from keyingredient.com as my base recipe. I pulled out my flour, I pulled out my yeast, I grabbed my 7-year-old to turn this into a learning opportunity, and we mixed away. 3 hours later, we had the most delicious smelling kitchen. We were salivating as this rosy loaf exited the oven. We grabbed the butter from the fridge, and as the bread cooled, we got ready to cut into this absolutely perfect loaf. Ping! Ping! That is the sound of a knife vibrating off the crust of our bread, off the watermelon rind hard crust of the bread. It was hard. It was vibrate the knife hard. It smelled good. It smelled really good. But it was almost impenetrable. Once we opened the bread vault crust, we did relish the warm interior. The buttery, warm interior, it was heavenly. And as the children downed the entire warm loaf, except the crust, they quickly decided several things. 1, it was delicious, but no pepper flakes. It's too spicy and too concentrated. 2, no shredded Parmesan cheese. It gives a really funny texture. And lastly, no fresh basil. It leaves black streaks in the bread that for kids is completely unappetizing. The parents observed the bread was a little hard. The bread didn't rise very well, and it was crumbly and not really all that great for sandwiches. But that first loaf disappeared, warm with a great deal of butter, but we still needed sandwich bread. So I went on to research how to solve these problems. I Googled and searched bread crust too hard solutions. Reddit had a great question stream with multiple answers, and I found I could add a dish of water to my oven to create this moist environment that could replicate a specialty bakery oven, and I could even regulate the interior humidity of my oven, and that was just too much for me. Someone else just recommended I wrap the loaf in a tea towel and put it under some plastic, and that would hold in the moisture. That worked. So then I searched bread too crumbly, and I found an article on the Spruce Seeds titled 10 Reasons Your Bread is Too Crumbly. I learned I could add fat, milk, butter, more oil to soften the texture, but I definitely needed gluten. That was the key difference between the all-purpose flour that I had and bread flour. And to get the bread consistency I desired, I needed gluten. So my all-purpose flour wouldn't cut it. I either needed bread gluten or bread flour or vital wheat gluten to add to my all-purpose flour. Now they were both pretty impossible to find, especially at a reasonable cost during the coronavirus. Shelves were empty of flour, shelves were empty of bread, and I had a 25-pound bag of all-purpose flour. So first, I searched the internet and I found I could get vital wheat gluten for $18 plus shipping and handling, and I would have to wait until it was back in stock, estimated in 3 weeks. Plan B. My successful plan B meant I called 6 different area grocery stores, and a specialty grocery store had it in stock. And better, my husband was able to pick it up on one of his rare trips into work and bring it home to me. I procured the needed vital wheat gluten. We rejoiced. Our second loaf of bread was mixed up, and even in mixing, we could already tell that the texture of the kneaded dough was more elastic thanks to the added gluten. The first rising was lovely, and my 7-year-old punched it down, kneaded it briefly, and then we put it into the bread pans and placed it in the oven for its second rising. It rose, and it rose, and it rose, and it rose, and it rose until it spilled all over the oven grates, and it was like the blob who was trying to escape the confines of the oven and was searching for its prey in our house. It was a mess. Our next loaf was perfect. I wrapped it in a tea towel right out of the oven, covered it in a plastic dish pan. It was beautiful. It was sliceable. It was delicious. It was perfect for hot turkey sandwiches on a cool spring day. My 7-year-old was uber proud of his contribution to the family meals. We created our COVID-19 bread recipe. Now, as I thought back over the story of finding our bread recipe for our family, I realized that it actually followed the known process of how humans manage disruption. William Bridges wrote a book called Transition, and he marks 3 stages following a disruption. There's an ending, a neutral zone, which he also calls the in-between zone or the messy middle, and then a new beginning. My bread story is all about the in-between process, the messy middle, and then the new beginning, wrapped up in 5 minutes. So what you didn't hear about was the ending to my perfectly organized Thursday, the day when I always bought bread, the day that lockdown robbed from me, the day that gave life to the rest of my week, and it ended all of my structure immediately. That in-between zone is just this place of confusion and reorientation, and a time to discover these new normals. So it's really funny when we talk about bread, but the confusion, mistakes, lost resources, and failures really aren't that funny when we talk about something besides bread blobs. Then there's the new beginning. We found our bread recipe. We learned how often we needed to bake to make sandwiches for a week. And then the stores started to open and they were better stocked, and we started to buy bread again. And then it got hot and we just stopped baking, and we transitioned again. The second transition, not nearly as hard as the first. So I want you to think back about what has ended for you in the last 5 months. Can you see this process overlaid? An ending, a messy middle, and then a new beginning? Can you see it? And if you have a transition or a disruption that's on your horizon, rest assured that there is a transition process you too will go through. You will go through all 3 stages. And when you do, remember my COVID-19 bread story and be encouraged that you will have a new recipe, a new beginning, and hopefully a few retrospective laughs about bread blobs getting ready to attack you. And there'll be new beginnings for you too.